When a game tries to reinvent the wheel, most times it doesn't work. PRAGMATA takes quick-time events and implements them in an intense action game with a great story. This is the perfect game for people that like multitasking. I want to set the stage of what it is like to play this game. Imagine shooting an enemy, doing a puzzle, and paying attention to your surroundings so you don't take any damage. All of that while managing your weapons and all of the other enemies and their abilities. All of these at the same time. Even though the game is not extremely fast-paced, it feels intense because of everything going on at once, and that makes the gameplay extremely enjoyable. Every fight is intense because of those same reasons, and the fights get better as you progress the story. I want to ease your mind in case you have the wrong idea of what the game is like, because the beginning of the story makes it seem like you will feel isolated because of the setting the game has. Just listening to the description, it sounds like a horror story. You are on the moon with a kid, and there's robots trying to kill you. If you change the word robot to zombies, you already have a horror game. However, this game is not a horror game and is not really suspenseful. Having Diana with you kills all of the suspense a game with this setting could have, and the way the levels are lit take away from the idea of horror. Instead of feeling scared of fighting all of the robots, the game makes you feel strong enough to fight them, and being with someone that is constantly engaging you in conversation also eases the mind and distracts you from feeling fear. It could be because Diana is constantly asking questions about Hugh's personal life, or because Diana is always telling you to jump for an incoming attack that cannot be dodged. Maybe it's because as a player you get the responsibility of protecting a smaller being. I don't really know, but what I do know is that there is something psychological that makes you feel like you have to take the responsibility of protector the moment you meet Diana. Even though Diana talking always makes you feel secure, because there's always someone filling the void of silence, the developers knew how much they should be making her talk. She does not talk 24/7. There's a perfect balance of conversation and silence. She doesn't give you suggestions about any puzzles ever, except for probably letting you know to go to a second floor instead of where you are because you will take damage. You have to figure out the puzzles yourself, so there's a perfect balance of quiet and conversation. Finishing the main story of PRAGMATA made me appreciate the end credits of the game. When I finished the game, I had that feeling of emptiness because I thought it was over. Thankfully, I was wrong. There is a lot of content after the story ends, from a new game plus, new missions, and new challenges. I played the game for the story, and the story actually delivered a feeling of relief when I realized that they were not afraid to do exactly what was necessary to make the story memorable. It made me feel exactly what I wanted to feel because I saw the writing on the wall, but I thought they weren't gonna push through it. Even expecting a sad story, PRAGMATA surprised me with how solid the story was and how fun and distracting the gameplay is. Every chapter introduces different robots, and it keeps it fresh by giving you new weapons and mods for the puzzles you have to use to defeat these robots. Some mods freeze, some mods do more damage the more you hack, and the game lets you choose between these mods and the weapons anytime you're starting a new chapter. The shooting is slow and sturdy, and that might sound like a bad thing, but it is not. The game focuses more on impact rather than bullet health, and when you combine weakening enemies with the puzzles and a shotgun that blasts everything around, you feel how powerful the weapons are, but not all weapons work the same. One of the cool things about the weapons is that they're color-coded. And this is important because picking up a weapon during a fight is a fast action rather than a slow interaction. The game doesn't want you to read the weapons. It wants you to know the colors of the weapons so you pick them up, use them, and then switch them. And it also doesn't expect you to know how the weapons look. That's why they're color coded. The game knows the fights are intense, so it doesn't want you to stop to think if what you need is a shotgun or a hologram to distract the enemies. The colors already make sure you know what type of weapons you pick up once you learn them. You have the primary weapon that automatically reloads and takes forever to be used, which is annoying at first, but gets much better as you progress. Then you have the red weapons that are the strong and punchy ones. Then you got the green weapons that are the area of attack weapons that can slow enemies, blast enemies on an area, or shrink the puzzle grid. These are normally the weapons you use to make the robots easier to fight. And the last are the blue weapons that are utilities that can make holograms and distract enemies, or make shields to protect you. You can have a favorite weapon, but you will be using all of them when you're fighting because the enemies take a lot of damage if you're not hacking them. And trust me, some encounters do need you to use everything you can find. Something really cool about the enemies is that you have a codex called the database that tells you where the weak points to do extra damage are once you hack them, and you get this information by exploring and playing bingo in the hub. Now this is important because the enemy designs are really cool because the robots look really simple, but once you hack them they open up and their design changes. You can see the insides of the robots and shoot at the sensitive parts, kind of like your ex did to you when you opened up to her. The issue with the design is that the robots are white and the critical parts are light blue. Sometimes, depending on the level and the lighting, you can't tell when a robot is hacked. Thankfully, that changes as the robots get more difficult. In harder difficulties, the robots are red to indicate that they're more aggressive, and that fixes the issue of visibility because no matter the level or lighting, when the robot is hacked, it is clear because of the nice contrast between the red robot and the white and blue critical parts. And this is also where the database comes in. If you cannot see very well when they're hacked, you don't see where the critical points are, you can use the database to know exactly where the critical parts are. The very first time you kill a robot, you do not know what the actual critical part of the robot is. So you can go into the database and make sure that where you're shooting is where you do the most damage. Sometimes shooting at the head is not the best strategy. So going back to the database and knowing which part is actually the critical part helps out a lot to make the game easier. With all of this stimulation the gameplay may give you when you think of shooting and hacking at the same time, it is understandable if you think this game is hard or complicated. But if you think like this and you are insecure that you won't be good enough to hack enemies and shoot at the same time, the game has a mod that automatically hacks by pressing one button, so that shouldn't be a worry. And while you're hacking, the auto aim helps by staying on target, so you don't have to be really good at shooters or put your fingers in a claw to do well in the game. Having a game where there is no open world, everything is compacted for you to explore and find collectibles is such a cozy feeling, and this game pulls it off perfectly. As you progress the story, you have chapters where you can get collectibles to fill up your hub area and make it look like a home for Diana. Diana is the other protagonist, the kid. And the cool thing about the exploration is that finding collectibles is fairly easy because square is the dedicated button for a pulse to show you exactly where everything is. The chapters are fairly big and there are checkpoints that appear after a challenging part. The bad thing about these checkpoints is that once you use them, you need to go back to the hub and redo your loadout. This breaks the pace of the game. This makes it harder for you to play the game without taking breaks. You could not use the hub, but that means that you will carry on with the low health if you took too much damage on the previous encounter. There is a reason why they do this, and it's mostly because Hugh and Diana are always interacting when they're in the hub. Every time you get to the hub is an opportunity to talk to Diana and get a different dialogue, so it does make sense when it comes to building the story. But once you start a new game plus or start a new playthrough, it gets annoying because it ends up getting repetitive. My one complaint is that instead of the game letting you play however you want, it makes you take a break from the gameplay if you need to heal. Once you beat the game, you also get a different weapon, so you have an incentive to do multiple playthroughs. Not only that, you get one extra difficulty that changes the enemy's approach very drastically, and they add another hub where you do even more challenges. Some chapters have a challenge room called the Red Room that gives you more XP and needs a key to get in. The way you find these keys is by looting around, and that's normally how far the exploration goes. You can find these red keys, extra XP, and toys for Diana, which are the best collectibles because every time you get enough toys, you get a little cutscene of a built playground for her.
We did it! Look, we've collected the entire series! You must spend every day on Earth in fun places like this.
The extra content that I mentioned after you beat the game is not only the difficulty, but it's also challenges in the hub. They also increase in difficulty, so this will keep you busy for a while. Now that we're talking about the hub, I want to say that when I first beat the game, I thought the hub was a little unnecessary. But the hub is an essential mechanic for replayability and to know more about Hugh as a character. When I finished the story, I thought I found a plot hole. And as I kept playing and talking to Diana, they actually mentioned the plot that I had an issue with and gave a reason as to why it makes sense. So the hub is important not only to see all of the collectibles or to level up your characters, but also to learn about the PRAGMATA world as you advance the story. Every time you go to the hub, Diana and Hugh have interactions that make their bond stronger. and these interactions make you fall in love with the characters. This is emphasized by having the characters isolated and only interacting with each other. Even though there is another character, it's a robot that lets you play bingo and gives you tutorials, so there isn't any connection there. This little robot does have an interesting concept though. He gives you the chance to play bingo, not only for fun, but also to unlock costumes and weapons. Completely optional, but not worthless. The hub also lets you make a small loadout. This is where you can choose the weapons and the mods to make a build stronger depending on how you want to play. This build only lasts a short amount of time because the moment you waste your resources, you have to pick up whatever is around to survive. When I mention puzzles, I don't mention regular puzzles that you have to figure out as a riddle. You don't have to be a smart person to solve them. These are visual puzzles that are easy to do as long as you're looking at the screen. They're basically quick time events, but you can mess them up and just figure them out as you go. There is no failing the puzzles unless there's a timer, and the timers on the puzzles come from bosses and enemies grabbing you. And those are the best experiences because if you don't do them fast enough, you're actually getting hit really hard. The only way the progress on the puzzle gets reset is if you're hit, so you can take the game as slow as you want. You don't need to do puzzles in a set amount of time, and there's this beautiful feeling you get when you get the feedback that you pulled off a big puzzle. Now, you know what else is beautiful? The game and the environment. The game has a nice contrast between realistic and futuristic graphics that get darker as the story unfolds. You see the beauty at the beginning, and then you see the disaster at the end. The maps are not big, but they do have ways to make it fun to explore. It is as simple as instead of going to the right, you go to the left to find something. From story holograms to the toys that I mentioned before. Knowing there is a collectible at the end of that path is satisfying because you know something is at the end of that path. Especially because it was made for that. And this is why I like the chapters. Everything is made for a purpose. They can put a collectible in a corner and also throw a different type of enemy that will change the pace of the game. It doesn't repeat. It always changes the dynamic around the map and the enemies you fight. This point might seem irrelevant, but it is important because the game is not too long. The game's main story took me 13 hours on the standard difficulty, which is the normal difficulty, and having things not repeat is huge because it makes the game feel fresh every single chapter you play. It makes you want to play the game again once you unlock the new difficulty.
You got fish?
Baby! Initiative.
The story and the gameplay are the best aspects about the game, and they're made better with the music. The music is normally very slow on the story beats, but incredibly cool when it comes to the fights, especially the boss fights. Even though the boss fights are fun, they're not innovative when it comes to the mechanics of the bosses, but it is fun completing the puzzles because they get harder as the chapters pass. Remember how I said you get a beautiful feeling when you finish a puzzle? This happens a lot when you do them in a boss fight because the grids get bigger, the empty spots get filled with mods that slow the input, some spaces have bars that don't let you go to the finish line faster, and everything resets if you get hit. The bosses also look really cool, and if you go to the locations where you previously fought those bosses, they respawn with a red shell and give you a more difficult battle to keep the exploration interesting and to make sure you're not feeling safe. PRAGMATA is a game that I can recommend to anyone interested in a good story with good gameplay. This game is an easy game to 100%. The only hard challenge would be to finish it on the hardest difficulty, and that isn't even that hard. The only thing is that you have to finish it twice. The game also ran flawlessly for me on my PS5 Pro. Absolutely no FPS drops or bugs at all. If you want to feel what it's like to play a really good game and invest your time in a game that runs flawlessly, you should try PRAGMATA.
Don't sweat it. Teammates look out for each other.
If you want more reviews and first impression videos, subscribe. And if you like this video, prove it by liking the video. Okay, thank you. Bye.
The comms tower! We made it!
Yeah, let's go. I gotta call home.